Can everyone hear me okay? Just making sure. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Allie, and my group and I, we are the Recyclopedia group. So before we begin, I want everyone to think in their heads about the last time you ordered pizza for takeout. Maybe it was yesterday. For me, it was. I ordered some Domino's pizza with my roommates. It was amazing. All right, then I want you to recall, if you can, what you did with your pizza box. Did you throw it away? Did you recycle it? Did you leave it? Did you save it for leftovers? All right, for some of you, this might be a really silly question because you always recycle your pizza boxes. You don't even think twice about it. And for some of you, you might be really confused and not even ever think of this question because you never even think about recycling. And some of you might be maybe somewhere in the middle of all of that. So last night, I had this dilemma with my roommates where half of them said, Allie, of course we're supposed to recycle the pizza box. And the other half said, no, we're not. Where I'm from, we don't. And we got into this whole debate. And how it ended was basically after this conversation, we did the easy and less stressful thing to do, and we just threw it away because that's the easier thing to do. So, not knowing what to recycle or even how to recycle is really a common theme here at BU. Eski, do you mind switching to the next slide? Okay, so how did we confirm that this is an actual dilemma here at BU? So through this class, we conducted a survey of the Boston University student population. So we found that 70% of people said that they recycle. However, in a follow-up question, only 3.4% of those people are actually extremely comfortable in their knowledge about what they can recycle. This is obviously really contradictory information because how can 70% of people say, yeah, I definitely recycle, and then only 3.4% of them actually know how and what and where to recycle? The next statistic we want to bring up is that only 11.5% of the students we surveyed feel sufficiently educated by BU. This tells us that there's clearly a lack of education and still uncertainty about what and how to recycle. We then also performed a follow-up question of what they would possibly like as a resource to help them be more sustainable. So 77% of people, when given a list of options, chose that they thought an app would help them be more sustainable and help them recycle.
As BU strives to become a more sustainable campus, we see a disconnect with the university's goals and student involvement. This is due to lack of easily accessible resources to address this issue, such as an educational platform for sorting that can help students be more aware of recycling. There is also confusion about current resources available at PU, such as the Recyclopedia resource that can help solve this issue to a certain extent.
So, what did we learn throughout the semester when we were researching this project and how to solve this problem in the right way? So, when we found out from sustainability at BU that a resource called Recyclopedia that Isa mentioned already exists on their website, and that it allows users to search an item to find out if it's recyclable or not, we realized that the problem we found in our survey could be addressed through an existing resource. And by relying on an existing resource, we felt that our proposed solution could be more feasible. However, Recyclopedia isn't perfect, and we made it our focus to address the problem by repackaging that resource to make it more accessible, well-known, or enticing to students through an app. And we then did extensive research on the current market for apps like this. And one of the examples we found was Recycle Nation, which is the largest recycling database in the world. It's really similar to Recyclopedia, but it works everywhere, and it allows you to type in a zip code to see what recycling regulations you should be adhering to. And since 2007, when the app went online, they've helped over 10 million people recycle correctly. So this showed us that apps like this can be extremely successful, but we felt that an app tailored to Boston recycling regulations and to the BU community would be more successful for our purposes. And we also learned about a campaign from Sustainability at BU that's by the state of Massachusetts that brings awareness to the recycling laws within the state, and that's Recycle Smart MA. And their website has a super similar recycling search tool to Recyclopedia. So therefore it has the same accessibility and advertising limitations. We also focused a lot of our research on other universities to see what they're doing to tackle students' recycling accuracy and also their confidence while recycling. And we found a combination of mandatory and behavior encouragement programming. So at BU, the Sustainability Office is already starting to tackle the mandatory side of things with the proposed Green EDU training. So they're in the process of creating that with the Zero Waste Plan. Hopefully that goes forward. And our Recyclopedia app would instead focus on the behavior encouragement side of things in order to address the need for points of intervention after mandatory events like orientation or a Green EDU training, because there has to be something to supplement the ideas that get introduced during these mandatory programs in order to effectively change the behavioral norms for students. So Eski is now going to elaborate on the behavioral norms side of things.
Yeah, as Keely said, we did some extensive research onto how we can make a behavior change, because after all, what we're trying to do is implement a new norm to Boston University. And what we learned from Stern, who is a psychologist and a lot of publications in the sociology, American Sociology Association journalisms, we found out that a value and a belief, when it becomes a norm, that's when it actually sticks in to wherever you're making change. But in order to do that, what is important is the value here, but also accessible resources that will help and implement all the changes that you're bringing in. So that's why we're trying to get the Recyclopedia into making a provided and accessible tool to Boston University's community in order to clarify what waste sorting is, what you can recycle in Boston, what you cannot, and where you can do that in Boston itself.
So you might be wondering how we actually confirmed that the Recyclopedia resource could actually solve the problem that we found in our survey related to student recycling accuracy and student confidence while recycling. So in order to do that, we actually conducted a small scale experiment, admittedly very small. We gave 14 BU students across different study areas some common objects to sort in recycling, trash, or compost. And half of the students had access to the Recyclopedia resource, while the other half did not have access to Recyclopedia. And the results showed a 22% increase in student recycling accuracy when they had access to Recyclopedia. And not only that, but we asked all the students to rate their confidence in their answers out of 10. And the access to Recyclopedia improved their confidence by 1.8 points out of 10. So therefore, we can infer from this that the Recyclopedia resource that already exists at BU solves the exact problem of student accuracy and student confidence in recycling that we set out to solve. So based on feedback that we heard from participants about the way the current Recyclopedia resource is set up and how it's a little bit cumbersome, we knew that the problem could only be solved if Recyclopedia gets repackaged in a more enticing way. So now I'm going to pass it to Isa to show you how we would repackage this resource into an app.
Thank you. So here is how we see the app to work. First, you open the app and then you search or scan the item that you want to dispose of, after which the app will give you instructions about where and how to dispose of the item. So now we have a demo that will show how this app would work in real life.
Okay, so if you don't hear it, let me know. I don't know. Can you recycle it?
Well, I know in New York you can for sure.
I don't know, dude. It has like all this grease on it. From Maryland, we're not allowed to do that, so I vote for trash. I don't know.
Trash? Recycle it.
Wait, guys, have you ever heard of Recyclopedia?
The Recyclopedia resource is the best way for BU students to figure out what is and is not recyclable. I really think you guys should give it a try. Using the Recyclopedia resource, you can either search your item in the search bar,
or you can scan to see if it's recyclable or not, and where you can recycle it on campus.
Thank you, Recyclopedia.
Thank you, Recyclopedia.
That was our little demo of how this would actually work once everyone at BU knows about the Recyclopedia app. So our next steps for this project would be to get a source of funding to actually allow us to create the app. We'd need funding to work with students or professors who have experience with app creation, which leads us to the next step of making the app fully functional. And after that, we would speak with campus leaders like orientation leaders, FY101 peer mentors, RAs, dean's hosts, and more to spread the word about the app. And lastly, we would advertise it in on social media and maybe in some other ways, like potentially integrating our app into the end of a mandatory green EDU training to hopefully give students actionable steps to take after these trainings to improve their recycling habits. So this would really allow the app to fill that need for points of intervention after the students complete the mandatory programming. Or we could also add QR codes to the GSU recycling bin signage that says, you know, do you wish you had signs like these at home? Download the Recyclopedia app to help you recycle better, or something like that, to prompt students to find our app and also download and use it. So next, Ali is going to touch more on the barriers to adoption to Recyclopedia.
All right, thanks, Keely. All right, so moving off what Keely said. So while this app is a great idea, we obviously need to address the obvious barriers as well. So the first and probably most important one is the time and money that would go into this app. We obviously need a team of people we would need to come with, and hopefully we could find that here at BU, but it would take time to find a team of people to help us create the app. Again, like Keely said, we would need to secure some funding for this. So these are all things that are very, we could totally do and are totally doable, but they're obviously things that we need to consider when moving forward. The second thing to mention is the internet. How is this different than the internet? Why don't you just go Google something, right? What's the difference with that? So the idea here is with the internet is that Recyclopedias, for one thing, specific to BU. So the internet, like we showed in our demo video, like different states might have different rules. So our product is specific to BU. And second, how easy our app is to use and that it will be very user friendly. So that is a problem that we mentioned in our previous research of why I think that we can overcome this barrier, because our app will be easier for users to use. Finally, the most important barrier and solution that we have for it is, as Ezgi had mentioned earlier, we need to create a norm here at BU of using Recyclopedia. We can't just create an app and hope it goes somewhere. We need to make it normalized. We need people to actually use it. So going off of what we had talked about earlier, if we can create a culture of using Recyclopedia, we can get more and more people to use it. So in our previous research, colleges and universities around the country who have ranked high in sustainability not only have just small initiatives on campus, but have this culture of being sustainable. So our hope is that this app will help create a culture of being sustainable here at BU. So the reality is, if we can get even 20% of BU's extremely large student body to currently and frequently use Recyclopedia, this would still significantly help BU reduce waste, which is our ultimate goal, helping us getting closer to our goal of zero waste by 2030. So that's all from us. Thank you guys for listening. So please let us know if you have any questions or want to reach out to any of us. Thank you guys.
Well done. I like the improved graphics from the last version. Those were great. What a treat to see. Yeah, so does anyone have any questions?
I do have one. This is Katie. Sorry, I was a little bit late. Awesome presentation. Love the video. Very creative. My question is, you've mentioned it being both Boston specific and Boston University specific. And obviously the university follows the rules for the city and the state, but we do have our own unique drop-off locations, numbers to call, that kind of stuff. So do you envision it being more specific to the university or to Boston as a whole?
I think I'll take it, guys. I think we envision it to specifically be for Boston University, since I think there is a scale where we're thinking about, it will tell you how to recycle it and also where to recycle. And we want that nitty gritty, like wherever on campus you are, where you can get that product that you have, into a trash, into a recycling bin, or whatever your app says. So Boston level, I think we also want to make sure that our terriers are supported when they go out to the world. So we definitely want to add those on. But I think our first envisioning is that, we want our campus to be fully, knowing that like you can recycle in our campus, and then we want to scale it up.
I had a question. You mentioned appropriately. You mentioned development of this app, and do you have any idea how to budget for that? Do you have any estimate of maybe how much that might cost to do this? Your funding sources may ask the same question. Is why I'm getting at it.
I think my group maybe can add on to what I'm about to say, but from my understanding, we kind of can't really move forward until we really have a further idea of how much and how intense I think our app is. So obviously there would need to be further research done on like what exactly will go into our app, because none of us are specifically computer science oriented people. So I think we would need to have a conversation, like you just mentioned, with people and then go along moving forward. So once we, I think, further research and probably meet with like more of a computer science developing team, then we can move forward with how much time, how much money would we need in terms of looking for funding. So I think another next step would be talking with more people who would understand the actual background of creating our app. So for now, I guess we cannot really give you an exact answer to that, but I don't think we really can until we meet with other people, if that makes sense.
Adding on to what Ali said, I think what looks beneficial on our side is that there is already the whole data on like the Recyclopedia data is out there, right? It's on the website. So that data will.
My name is William Reed, and today I'm joined with Danielle, Jose, Senyang, and Isabel. And we're going to talk about our project, which is reducing post-consumer waste in the dining hall. So what do we seek to do and why? We seek to implement a student-led multimedia campaign aimed at changing the behavior of students in terms of the food they waste at the dining hall, after they eat, et cetera, et cetera. And so why is it important to focus on students? One, as you're all well aware, they are the biggest users of dining hall. Most everyone in there is a student. And two, especially after the post-COVID meals and even during the COVID meals, there's a lot of food that students take that they don't necessarily eat, and we want to put a stop to that in order to help BU meet its sustainability goals. So obviously, with climate change and the entire climate crisis, it's kind of an all-hands thing. So BU has some pretty aggressive sustainability goals, which includes 90% diversion of non-hazardous waste by the year 2030. And a lot of these things are aligned with the city of Boston's climate plans and the state of Massachusetts climate plans, which are also very aggressive. And so help is needed at all levels in dealing with this issue. So it's our job and our responsibility to do what we can as students to help alleviate the problem.
Hi, I'm Jose, and I'm going to talk about how we believe our group can make an impact on food waste at BU based on research and observations that we have made. Change ultimately begins with educating students. We found that students generate the largest amount of food waste on campus. Of course, this makes sense since they're the largest demographic group in a college campus. We also found that most students feel uninformed about the impact of food waste and recycling on campus. However, the fact that they're the easiest demographic to attain through social media makes them the prime candidates to inform about food waste and recycling. Based on a study conducted at Thai University, it was found that only 11% of students finished their meals completely, which demonstrated over 80% of food waste in their student body. The Thai University addressed this problem using posters, informational cards, and social media in order to raise awareness and make an impact. This campaign doubled the percentage of students finishing their meals. This is why we believe our social media campaign will be most effective in reducing BU's overall food waste. The issue isn't necessarily that students don't have access to options. It is more that they lack awareness.
Hi everyone, I'm Danielle. So given that 1/3 of the global population is using social media on a regular basis, we found that a social media campaign would allow for the most widespread outreach. And we looked at a qualitative study conducted in Finland, which assessed the benefits of a social media campaign in advocating for a reduction of food waste. And it found that using social media allowed for creative and visually appealing promotions, two-way communication and conversation surrounding the topic, as well as positive reinforcement, all of which had positive impacts on the campaign's goals. So outside of a university setting, we've seen large companies transition to using social media to highlight their sustainability practices. And with that, the presence of these companies on social media has allowed their audiences to question and challenge these companies regarding their sustainability and just overall hold them more accountable. So an example of the potential of using social media in corporate America to promote sustainability is Ford's One Tank Adventure campaign, which was a YouTube series promoting their fuel efficiency. And the campaign went viral with 30 million hits and 1.6 billion overall media impressions, which just further confirms the potential for widespread outreach in using social media. So we truly believe that a campaign targeted at reducing food waste is truly a mutually beneficial endeavor, given that greenhouse gas emissions attributed to food waste have nearly tripled over the past century, and the average consumer is wasting about 17% of food on their plates. It's definitely an important problem to address, and we believe that starting with universities could be really beneficial. Especially looking at a school like BU where they house thousands of students, universities can be really large producers of waste. But with that being said, universities are also oftentimes on the forefront of social change. And so starting a campaign of this nature in a university setting could spark similar changes elsewhere.
Creating a change in student behavior will be a long process and cannot be expected to be a quick fix. For example, Montana State University found a 17% reduction in measured food waste when intervened by adding smaller portion sizes and smaller serving utensils. Despite the positive result, this study was only conducted over the span of 3 weeks, which is not nearly long enough to make a long-term effect on the school's waste impact. Our group really believes consistency is the key to creating a long-term change in BU sustainability. Behavioral change needs to be studied and enforced for a proper amount of time in order to see the real impact a campaign like ours can make.
Hi, I'm Chang Yan. I look into a study published in Resources Conservation and Recycling magazine. The researchers did a series of experiments about the influence of food waste reduction campaign in universities and derived the data from these samples. So the statistics of the treatment in this image shows a decrease in other waste and increase in protein waste, as well as fruit or vegetable waste, while the comparison has a decrease in protein waste and fruit or vegetable waste, but an increase in other waste. The total waste of students in dining halls decreased in both objects, but in a modest amount. However, the research shows the change right after the campaigns cannot define the significance of them. The influence on students' beliefs leads to a long-term development in food waste reduction. Next, I will talk about BU dining on social media. So BU Dining Service works on multiple social media platforms. It has the most followers on Twitter, which is about 7,000 people. On Instagram and Facebook, it has about 3,000 followers, while on YouTube, there are only 62 subscribers. They update it about once or twice a day on average. On Twitter, it retweeted BU sustainability a couple of times. Also, it has some posts related to zero waste as well, but based on the few likes and comments, they did not attract much attention. On YouTube, it quickly mentions sustainability in the introduction video, but it can be easily ignored by students who watch it. In some of their posts on Instagram, they tagged zero waste at the end, but without further explanation about the connection to it. So students could not attach great importance to zero waste or how they can put into practice in BU dining halls.
Hi, my name is Isabel, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why, for our purposes of reducing post-consumer waste on campus from the dining halls, social media is going to be the most effective tool. So the main reason being is social media is already where students mainly turn to for information. And we got to sit down and talk with the program manager of the F It Won't Cut It campaign, which is a campaign that has come out of the Boston University community that has been extremely effective in regards to starting a conversation among students and shifting student behaviors regarding COVID-19 safety practices, but this could be modeled to apply for our purposes of reducing post-consumer waste. So for that campaign, the most effective app out of Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, which they've used, was Instagram, receiving an engagement rate of 59%, and also 350,000 impressions overall. So Instagram is mainly where we would first start. Like previously stated, this is the easiest way to get a very large outreach into the BU community. Posts from this campaign could be partnered with the BU Sustainability and BU Dining to jumpstart a presence and engage conversation across different BU communities. And this information presented through the screen can start to spark real life conversation amongst students. As students' knowledge of food waste practices and food waste reduction increase, then they can start to spark up conversations in their groups and increase action in their post-consumer reduction rates in campus. And then off to the side, you can see a post that we mocked up initially. And then on the next slide, there are a couple of changes that we've made to kind of suggest a cohesive plan for what this could look like. If you could go to the next slide, perfect. So there's, so we have a suggested logo and name for the Terrier Food Waste Reduction Initiative. A potential campaign or series that could the campaign could have is like food waste fun finds to show students, people out in the real world who are doing great stuff in regards to food waste and how those actions could be implemented on campus. And then to further conversation from the screen into real life, there would be posters around campus to bridge the gap between the virtual world and the real world, and QR codes that could be scanned to further students' knowledge.
So a big part of this campaign would be making sure that students feel like their efforts are being noticed and rewarded. And so to do that, we would implement a positive reinforcement, a certain type of positive reinforcement or multiple types to the project as a whole. So whether that would be rewarding students for example, decreasing their waste week by week by some sort of discount or some sort of prize, or by just publishing that lean path data like Giovanni said, so that they can see the trend in overall food waste, or some other form of competition. We want to make sure that students know that what they're doing has an impact and that they're being rewarded for changing their behavior. And so we did research and we found that positive reinforcement, which would be that kind of, noticing and rewarding versus kind of punishment, is typically more effective in getting people to change their behavior long term. So that concludes our presentation. Are there any questions about anything that we talked about?
Again, very well done. Thank you. A great presentation, and a lot of good information based in a lot of good research about why this really could be very important for BU. So just to start off by saying congratulations. I especially liked your graphics that you sort of put together for this, just thinking about the aesthetics of, how to, we've discussed this previously, but the aesthetics of how to create something visually appealing that gets a message across. And so thank you for giving examples that you've given some thought to around aesthetics and a message.
Yeah, I liked your presentation very much. I do have a question. I didn't have the benefit of seeing your dry run of the presentation, and so I would have asked this question then. What actual steps would you, if I were a student, actually, I do eat in the BU dining halls. Well, I used to when I was on campus. Marciano Commons is just way too tempting and way too convenient because my office is just upstairs. And so the number of days that I would have breakfast and sometimes even lunch at Marciano Commons was pretty high. The ladies there knew me pretty well. What if I subscribed to your Instagram, if I subscribed to your social media, what advice would I get, or what specific actions would you encourage me to take in order to reduce my food waste? And how would I say necessarily log that, right? I mean, if I'm going to get a reward for, not wasting food, what would be the mechanism? What would you tell me to do? And then what would be the mechanism by which I would earn my reward?
So this would be the multimedia part that we were talking about. And ideally we would have an app or certain system, which we'd probably have to partner with either BU Sustainability or another group to create. But I do think that could help attract people to the BU Sustainability app if that was something we could do. And it would be to have like a QR code / poster system physically in dining halls with information reminders, and then also have an app that you can log your food waste on, either by taking photos or just by entering the amount of meals you took day by day, and then answering a quick survey whether or not you finished them, just for self accountability as well as for the data on the app. And then having that system track it day by day, week by week, et cetera, and generate both data that the person themselves can see, so they can see, am I finishing my meals week for week, and am I getting too much, et cetera. And also just have like perhaps a competition, or perhaps work with BU Dining to have like a certain system where if you don't waste, if you keep below a certain level of food waste per week or per month or something, maybe you get a free meal swipe or something like that. But ideally, yeah, it'd be like a two-part system, one having posters at the tables in the dining halls with QR codes so that you could get to the app and you could get to the information, and then two, having that system to track it.
Okay, well, so I feel like you did a good job answering the second part, which is sort of, how I would track it and all of that. But I'm still going to push you, everyone in your group, on, if there's like posters set up in the dining room, or there's like, every day I get a, food waste tip that pops up in my, messages on my phone or whatever. What specific advice would you give people, right? Because if you just say, reduce your food waste, I mean, that's good. It's good to get that message over and over again. But sometimes people need help thinking about like how to reduce their food waste. So what are some things that you guys have run across, or some ideas that you have about how to help people reduce their food waste, rather than just necessarily eating past the time that they're full because they took too much and they want to have a clean plate, and so they stuff themselves with, the rest of their food on their plate?
I can speak to this. So a lot of the research that we looked at, like of similar studies aimed at reducing food waste, the biggest focus that they had was just to like constant reminders to reduce your portion sizes if they're not suiting your needs. So what they found was that from those posters or scanning QR codes and just seeing those constant reminders of that, students were much more aware, which did lead to like measurable effects in reducing food waste. So I think that that's a really important place to start, is just constant reminders of only taking portions that you truly will eat. And then I think once that's like a beginning step, and then once there are effects seen in that area, we could transition into like more like higher level sustainability efforts and just continue on in reducing the food waste overall.
One thing that I implement in our house, because I have two little kids, and they always want seconds. if we're eating something yummy. And so we've had to institute the policy of you have to wait 15 minutes before you can ask for seconds, because, you know, all these studies that show it takes about 15 minutes for your brain to recognize that you're actually full. And so, you know, that could be another important thing, is encouraging students not to say, take 3 different main meals all at the same time, but like get one, wait a little while, see if you're actually still hungry, then go up and get another one. Now, I know it's a little problematic because the amount of time that you have for lunch or dinner or whatever, particularly breakfast, might be very, you know, it might be a very short time that you have. So sometimes you're kind of rushed that way. But that's certainly one that has been important in our house, is most of the time after 15 minutes, my kids are like, yeah, I'm not actually as hungry as I thought I was. So.
Well,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Danielle.
Going along with that, one of the studies that we looked at in particular worked with the dining halls in reducing the size of their serving utensils for the portions. And so even just like seeing on your plate the smaller portion size, students don't really notice that it's smaller. It's just like they don't really understand the difference, that the portion sizes have changed and they're likely still going to be satisfied after one plate. So while that's not included in the social media aspect, it just proves that it is kind of just a mindset shift and just understanding what you truly are going to finish.
I mean, I think Rebecca mentions, her story mentioned something very important. It's not just constant messaging about your portion size and, you know, take what you need, or, you know, all those kind of good messages. And again, aesthetics and planning and marketing can really change the effectiveness of your message. But the other one is to just slow down, you know, attempt to slow down your eating, the speed of your eating. And maybe it's a twist on enjoy your company, have a conversation, you know, catch up with a friend, and, you know, eat slowly or something, because that's very effective in terms of hunger. You know, if you went that way, we had a lot of research, you probably could find a lot of it around satiation, hunger, fulfillment with slower food intake. So
I was struck while you guys were talking about how much there is in common with research around dieting, which is, you know, which isn't as focused on food waste, but it is focused on food consumption. So, you know, programs like Weight Watchers, you know, encourage a lot of the same things that you're talking about, you know, smaller portions, taking time to eat so that you recognize whether you're really hungry, not having a lot of food in front of you so that you're not as tempted to take food that you can't finish. Or in the case of Weight Watchers, they're like, if you take it, you're very likely to finish it. So it doesn't end up being food waste, but it ends up contributing to your own waste, which you know, is what the diet programs are interested in. But there is a lot of similarity, because both of them are about reducing consumption for different ends, but it ends up having a very similar outcome, right? If you just simply reduce the amount of food that makes it onto your plate, it benefits both the environment and your health. Comments from the rest of the class? Yashi.
Hi, I did put this question in the chat, and thanks, Isabel, for answering. I just kind of wanted some clarity on it. So my question basically was, if you were able to find any sort of data, and if you did, what were the results in terms of what's the post-consumer food waste before COVID happened versus after COVID happened? Because now we're allowed to take away containers, which you weren't allowed to do from dining halls earlier. So it kind of gives students the liberty to take just as much as they want, and that assumption that I might save it and eat it tomorrow, and so on and so forth.
So I think a lot of that would fall under lean path data if the dining halls even bothered to take data on it, because a lot of it is leaving the dining halls, and I feel like they probably took some liberty with not having to record what gets composted. But again, as Giovanni stated, that information not generally available to the public. It's available when the dining halls want to make it available. So have we seen data on it yet? No. Will we in the future? Perhaps. But I think if you were interested in finding out, you could probably find other schools that had a similar COVID response to us and see if they had data on it.
Well, it would also be a little bit tricky because you're talking about food that's leaving the dining hall and the takeout containers. The university has no way of knowing whether you are going back to your dorm and eating all of that food that's in your takeout container, or whether you're eating half of it and then throwing the rest of it away. Right. And so that during COVID, I think that's particularly difficult for them to know the post-consumer food waste. They might have an easier time collecting the data on the pre-consumer food waste because they can tell, how many meals did we make that didn't get taken, right? And they're putting them back in the, refrigerator for tomorrow or whatever. But I think that, knowing, and oftentimes you don't know yourself. I just learned today that the lunch that I made for my son, which it turns out it was a half day, so he didn't eat it, he forgot to bring it home in his backpack. And so, there's a ham and cheese sandwich and a banana and a Pop-Tart that are going to get thrown out by the janitor this afternoon because he just simply forgot to bring his Tupperware home. Right. And so sometimes food gets wasted because people are just forgetful. You bring home leftovers that you're really excited about, but you forget to put them in the fridge, and the next day you have to throw them out, things like that. Unless you're my dad, in which case he doesn't care. He'd eat it if it had been sitting out for 3 days. We used to call him buzzard belly because nothing made him sick, nothing. So, Gabby.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, ask, so I feel like a lot of the waste at school that I notice is if there's something that may look really appetizing in the dining hall, and so you'll get a bunch of this food because it looks really good, and then you'll try it, and just because it's dining hall food is not as good as you're expecting. And so sometimes I feel like maybe a lot of waste is necessarily not people misjudging how much they want to eat, but just not liking it, and it gets wasted. So I was just wondering if there was any findings for that, or if there was anything to address that.
I can talk a little bit about that. So not too much on our end with the stuff that we looked into. Did we get too much information about what to do in that regard? Because that's usually on the side of what the dining hall cooks decide to make and how they decide to make it. But the initial survey that we did put out prior to the one that we made for this class, we did receive a couple open-ended replies from students of just generally improving the quality of the food in an effort to reduce waste, because if the food is more appealing, then more students would just eat it. But so that was also a concern that we saw in regards to the surveys that we put out, but not in regards to what solutions to combat that desire.
And ideally hopefully the plan would for this app to be either in partnership with BU Sustainability or BU Dining, preferentially BU Dining. So then you can include the meals, because I believe in the dining hall, the meals run on a certain schedule, so most of the time they repeat every certain number of weeks. But the goal would to have a way so you can see what meals you're eating, what you're not eating, and maybe if you don't like something and it shows up 4 weeks from now, you won't have as much of it, or you won't eat it again. But that's a very ideal circumstance. It's probably a lot of work that would go into that, but yeah.
Well, I think that the BU Dining Services has I think that their website has opportunities for people to weigh in on foods that they like or don't like, right? So that, I remember when they first introduced their maple bacon cupcakes, I went on their website and was like, yes, please, more frequently. These things are amazing. You need to serve these more often. And so I think that I mean, it's not directly related to the food waste, but they do have a mechanism by which they can sort of get a sense of, what do the clients enjoy, what do they not enjoy, And they do try to be at least somewhat responsive to, to the clientele. And I can promise you the food, I mean, I've only eaten at Marciano Commons. I haven't eaten at the other dining halls, but certainly the food that I've been having there in the past 3 years is way better than the food that was served at Claflin Hall back in the 1990s, in terms of the quality, and getting rid of trays, getting rid of things like that has certainly increased or decreased food waste tremendously. So, there have been a lot of improvements along those lines. In fact, I've taken my kids to the Marciano Commons a few times and they love eating there. Of course, they usually just get like the waffle, like the make your own waffles. So missing out. Oh, Warren's the best.
That's what I think. No one else agrees with me though.
So imagine an app though, where student culture shifts to where you go to the dining hall and the app was able to measure with just photographs, try to do a good estimate of what's left over, what waste is, but also to get at the point of that Gabby was making, maybe you really get a feel for the likability of the food itself. You get a trend like the mac and cheese is always on the plate. When you take your post-meal picture, that tells the cooks that the mac and cheese is not that popular. I don't know if that's a problem with mac and cheese at BU Dining Services, but something, maybe there's a certain, it's a way to collect data around what people like to eat or don't like to eat. If you really had a good app that could really do good computer vision analytics, you might be able to really do something very cool with this.
Well,
we got to get our computer science colleagues on this. Sorry, Rebecca.
No. I like the idea of, if there were posters or whatever, right, really encouraging students to reduce post waste. I love the posters they have that sort of show what they do, that they compost this food and some of the food goes to these aerobic generators and whatnot. But kind of like with the plastics recycling problem, when people feel less guilty about throwing something in the recycling, they're more likely to purchase it in the first place, right? If they know that they're not going to have the guilt on the opposite end because they're like, oh, well, it's going to get recycled. And there are studies that show this, right? And so that's sort of one of the problems with recycling is that it sort of makes people feel less badly about buying stuff, plastic bottles and all of that, because they're like, oh, well, I can recycle it. And I don't think there have been any studies done, but it would be interesting to know whether knowing that the food is going to get composted makes people feel less badly about, oh, well, I'll try these Brussels sprouts, and if I don't like them, it's okay, they're going to get composted. And if that might actually encourage more wasteful practices, feeling like, oh, well, at least it's going to have, sort of a happy ending, when it would be better to just not have that at all. So I think putting the emphasis on reducing, take less, eat less, use less. Yashi?
A suggestion on some previous concerns that were raised, as in, like Professor Kinraid mentioned, how feedbacks about did you enjoy the food or not, and then I guess somebody else also talked about the temptation to take more food because it looks nice. I at least know that in the past, for sure, there were these reviews. I mean, there was this place, that stand, which has multiple buttons. You click on it and sort of give a review to the dining hall. You could probably, I would probably think about expanding a little more on that, encouraging students to, it's just a button press, maybe do that a little more in the dining hall, to take that a little more seriously, so that menu regulations in the future can be done accordingly. And if possible, make that review or feedback thing a little more comprehensive, if not just a button saying how happy you were or not.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and thank you for that point. For the app, ideally if we were with BU Dining, we wouldn't necessarily need like machine learning and computer AI, if we're using photos, ideally we could just have like the menu items on the app and then like, did you take this meal? Yes. Okay. What percentage of it did you eat? Like 25, 50%, 75, etc. And have that be a part of it. But yeah, it's definitely something to look into, and hopefully you're trying to create positive incentives for both BU dining and the students. So it definitely something to look at.
Well, great job, all of you. Andy and I are we were just so impressed with the work you guys did this semester, the research you did, the you know, the reading and the teamwork, and just, you know, all of the things. It's been such a pleasure for us to be along for the ride. You know, we only barely feel like we've been your instructors. So it's really been fantastic to you know, to see this and to see this final you know, these final projects. I'm going to stop recording now.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Salman, and I'm joined by my teammates Alavi and Gabby. We are the paper waste group, and today we'll be talking about the standardization of faculty printing. Let's start with some background information. Paper waste continues to be a significant problem in the United States and abroad. It makes up the largest component of municipal solid waste, with 67.4 million tons being generated in 2018 alone. That's about 1 billion trees worth of paper being thrown away every year. In addition, American households throw away about 13,000 separate pieces of paper every year, and in total use about 85 million tons of paper annually, which is about 680 pounds per person. Therefore, paper waste generation is extensive and part of our daily lives. This is a graph of where that paper waste ends up, more specifically looking at paper and packaging waste. As you can see, total waste peaked around 2000 and total recycled paper has plateaued in recent years, but a higher percentage of the waste is being recycled and the remaining is either combusted or landfilled. As you saw on the previous slide, about 2/3 of paper waste is currently being recycled. This is significantly better for the environment than combustion or landfills. However, recycling can still be a costly process that requires energy, which can sometimes come from burning wood or fossil fuels, and requires significant amounts of other resources, including water. So, our group is choosing to instead focus on reducing paper usage, more specifically, faculty paper usage on campus, as it is ultimately the more sustainable way forward. Now, let's focus on the situation at BU. Currently, individual departments are in charge of buying their own paper supplies, and they often provide unlimited printing to faculty members. There is no university-wide tracker to measure paper usage on campus. Therefore, there isn't a lot of data available on paper usage and determining the most significant sources of paper waste. Therefore, our group is proposing a central method to track paper usage among faculty, to generate data on paper usage. And we looked at student printing, which is already tracked by BU, and realized a similar system can be adapted for faculty with minimal costs. However, we realize that paper use is complex and ubiquitous, so one solution will likely not be enough to significantly reduce paper waste. Therefore, in addition to tracking and standardizing faculty printing, we wanted to generate a multi-pronged solution in order to tackle this problem effectively. So we are proposing to first standardize faculty printing and also adjust printing for pricing of faculty printing in order to curtail paper waste, generate relevant data, and also encourage faculty to maintain learn from anywhere adjustments post-pandemic.
All right, so now I'm just going to break down some of the claims we make, just kind of discuss them further. So the standardization and pricing of faculty printing is imperative. And so sustainability is already sort of moving in the direction of a standardized network as per the Zero Waste initiatives, which is a really important first step to sort of gathering that more comprehensive data. So we feel that paper use just needs to be tracked in order to understand how much is currently being used, and then sort of deciding how much we feel is reasonable to be reduced through any new initiatives. So for what we mean by just like standardized faculty printing, we're hoping that sort of all faculty and department printing runs through a centralized network that allows the print jobs to be tracked, and where all faculty sort of have to pay a set price for printing per page, and sort of have like a like standardized like budget to help sort of control and make sure there's consistency with printing between departments, and just have the possibility of double-sided printing or black and white printing sort of being priced differently than like single-sided or color, just to discourage that type of printing. So just sort of streamlining, unifying, and collecting data of faculty printing is sort of the first and most crucial step for paper reduction. And so for the standardized student printing, it is difficult to sort of fully understand the extent of paper use, but we sort of need that initiative of reducing faculty printing needs to come from, we can look at like the student standardized like my print structure to sort of transfer over to faculty, or alternatively sort of like duplicate that and apply it to a different like independent network of printers. So we're hoping that that is sort of like a more seamless and cost-effective method because the school already has the knowledge and experience with that program. And next slide. Okay, so we also talk about how the timing of this sort of implementation is really crucial, just because faculty and students have had to adapt to the Learn from Anywhere model, and both groups have had time to adjust to those non-printing modes of learning, which means that the transition to a more permanent solution to printing is already sort of largely underway. So typical faculty printing habits, such as printing like large reading packets or exams, or requiring students to print like essays, a lot of that has already been adapted and altered because of LFA. So a lot of that like returning to previous printing practices would just be more out of like preference or convenience. So we're hoping that like the timing of the implementation is sort of as soon as possible, and it's very crucial just to encourage a more like permanent printing reduction strategy, sort of in line with the transition away from LFA, and just sort of make it like a seamless, easy way so that we can prevent faculty from like slipping back into old printing habits. Okay, so this graph was generously provided to us from BU Sustainability. And as it's noted, it's just like a representative sample of print jobs here at BU before and after COVID. So as you can see, just from looking at like the past years, print jobs have been fairly consistent over the past few years, with maybe a slight increase in printed pages leading up to 2020. But we can see with COVID, those print jobs and printed pages dropped drastically. So it shows that we can easily reduce printing, and just like how drastic those changes could be with just like some slight adaptations to way we learn and work and that sort of thing. And so our goal moving forward would be to try and maintain these printing levels as we continue to ease back to in-person learning, by encouraging faculty to continue with many of those LFA practices that they've already gotten used to. Okay, so we also looked at what some other universities have been doing to try and tackle this printing issue. And so Yale was one of the universities we looked at. Yale started by implementing a management software called PaperCut as sort of their first step to better understand how much everyone was printing and sort of pinpoint different locations on their campus where printing may be really high, and try and figure out maybe why that might be and sort of what printing alternatives could be implemented to sort of target those high printing areas. And another thing Yale also did was to create like web pages with resources and guides to help people with like common printing needs, especially things like meeting plans or scheduling, or people who like to print emails, what kind of solutions could be in place to sort of replace those current printing practices with something more sustainable. And the other university that we looked at was Penn State. And so after collecting some data on printing, Penn State was surprised when they found out that about 5.5 million pages went through their printers and copiers during the 2013 to 2014 school year. And about 1 million of those were coming from faculty and staff, with 2.5 million coming from students. And then of course, 2 million copies were made. So with back in 2015, they had about a 17-to-1 faculty ratio. And so you can see how much each faculty is printing a much greater amount like per person than students. And so after doing some sort of like promotional campaigns and restricting student pages, printing pages to about 250 per person, they saw a 44% decrease in student printing, whereas there was only a 10% decrease for faculty, which could be suggestive that there could be more done to target faculty to sort of see a greater reduction. And it also could suggest how effective that like page restriction requirement was for students, for there to be such a greater decrease.
Okay, so coming back to what we're doing here at BU and looking at specific policies, we decided to reach out to departments through a number of different means. We first kind of did an email blast where we reached out to a bunch of departments all across the university, and we found that overall, as we mentioned earlier, they tend to be very liberal with their faculty printing. Most of the time that they don't track it, a lot of departments just have outright unlimited printing for their faculty. And then kind of building off of that, we conducted a survey of a number of department admins and faculty members. And among the admins, we found that 54% confirmed that their departments do have unlimited printing for the members of the department. And of the rest of the admins, 23% found that they had some sort of payment system. So this actually does already exist to an extent in the university. And then another 15% maintained printing budgets. And these are basically an allocation of per pages over a set period of time. So for example, you can maybe print out 200 pages in a semester, for example. I think it's far higher than that. And as we have heard from anecdotal evidence from our own professors, many departments that do maintain printing budgets never actually cap out. Many people who use them just kind of print as much as they want, and they don't really reach that limit. So next slide, please. So some of the practices we've taken to kind of adjust the alpha modality are, they're indicative of future paper reduction, right? As we've seen before with that graphic, there's been this drastic reduction in paper, and we found that people have adapted, right? Classes haven't suddenly ended and gone absolutely horribly, right? People aren't taking extra years. We found ways to adapt, right? And because these adjustments are already in place, all we need to do is not change, right? We just have to keep doing what we're doing. And I think that's what makes this a particularly effective solution, is that we're essentially working with defaults, which both minimizes cost and increases effectiveness. And since these are already norms that people in university have adapted to. Next. So our survey, we're going to go a little more data now. We looked for data on 4 primary categories. Some of the current practices professors are taking, professors and admins are taking. Some of the stances around maintaining these policies after the pandemic, some of the stances around canceling, like going against certain policies, and the reasons why people don't want to continue their policies. Right. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. So here's a selection. We had a number of questions, but here's one of them. One of those we found more important. So looking at some of the adaptations, of course, I think they make sense, right? A lot of online like class materials, right? Labs, quizzes, simulations, PDF readings, other types of interactive activities. A good example from the World Languages and Literature Department, specifically the German program, which I'm a part of, is that we're using online homework software, where it's kind of an interactive system that's actually helped quite a bit with the learning. So it has benefited the students quite substantially. There's also digital and online textbooks, which I think are relatively self-explanatory, and online exams, which are a point we will discuss on the next slide. So a follow-up to the prior question was asking all of the respondents which programs they would be for and against maintaining. And as you can see from the graph, the purple bars represent online textbooks, and those were by far the most popular target for continuation, so that might be a point of evaluation for the university. Furthermore, digital and online supplementary materials, as mentioned earlier, that quizzing software and homework software, those are also quite popular. And quite surprisingly, actually, online exams were surprisingly neutral. So while our sample size, full disclosure, was not huge, so it would not be statistically honest to make really sweeping claims. However, it may be worth investigating finding more ways to do secure exams online, because I'm sure, as many of you know, exams, especially, I speak from my own experience, some of the STEM departments, for example, mathematics and sciences, tend to be very paper intensive. So that might also be a point of consideration going forward. Next slide. And so for those who responded that they were against continuing something, we had a follow-up question where we asked why, basically, right? Why are they against it? I do want to mention that the bar for other is largely people who just said they weren't against anything. And there was one point where someone did mention how it did cause some eye strain, so that may be a point to consider. But by far, the most popular reason was academic honesty and security, and followed by personal preference, and then surprisingly, software deficiencies were the least common response. So that kind of leads us nicely into what sort of challenges a solution like this might entail. So we're going to go over those now. So by far the biggest is going to be faculty backlash. Generally, people like to stay in their ways, and as we saw in the prior graphic, one of the biggest reasons against maintaining these adjustments were academic security, followed by personal preferences. And academic security can be addressed through a number of different ways. There are the more common ways, such as using like lockdown browsers and other browsers which kind of prevent accessing the internet and such. But also there could be encouragements at the department level to change question formatting to be less conducive to academic dishonesty. For example, more complex questions or more context-specific questions. And personal preferences are a far more complex vector to take action on. However, this story has happened before at BU. BU has moved payroll online a number of years ago, and there was an adjustment period, but people eventually adapted. Blackboard was not always present. It was implemented at some point in the past. People learned, people adapted, and people got better with it. So given time, and given the correct encouragements, preferences will adjust, and people will adjust to the new norms that could be set through some changes in printing policy and the maintenance of COVID-19 adjustments. We'll go to the next slide, please. So the somewhat larger category of issues is implementation. We did want to mention the idea of scale, just to get ahead of any questions. Scale on the printing side is largely a non-issue. As we mentioned earlier, the BU MyPrint system already exists. So it's a matter of creating a separate network, scaling it down for faculty, and integrating them into the network. That being said, there will be some issues regarding getting faculty to install the relevant software, so the correct drivers onto their computers and all the devices they want to print off of. So that will require a bit of outreach on the part of sustainability and whoever takes this initiative. And regarding pecuniary costs, there will be some, right? Printers will need to be updated, a new network needs to be created. However, what's far more critical from the implementation perspective is, as we mentioned earlier, the time scale, right? In many ways, COVID-19 has been a once-in-a-generation opportunity for sustainability in this regard. As if we give professors the time, if we give faculty the time, eventually people will begin to move back to their old ways. And it'll be much more difficult to cause change and to create meaningful change. So the most important challenge of implementation will be the time scale. And that is just a matter of taking action and being proactive. So I think with that, we would like to show our sources and open the floor for questions.
Great job. I have a question right away, which is, have you talked to IS&T? Have you reached out to anybody from IS&T about either the technological or cost challenges of creating a MyPrint system for faculty similar to what already exists for students?
So we did attempt to reach out. However, unfortunately, we had some issues with responsiveness and timing. We would have to go through a few other channels, so we weren't able to compile the responses we got from them in time for the presentation, unfortunately.
I'll add that we have talked to IS&T. I think we shared that we had this idea as part of the Zero Waste Task Force process. So IS&T has thought about it, and it is actually much more expensive than you think it would be, because it does involve upgrading basically all of our printers. However, I think that you guys have a lot of good information and suggestions in your presentation, and the research from what other schools are doing, I think, is really helpful as well. That's always a good encouragement for us if it's being done elsewhere. So I appreciate that. And I would wonder if moving forwards with a full MyPrint program was not an option because of those costs, in what parts of your proposal do you think that we could move forwards on in the time frame that you're suggesting, which is basically this fall?
So I think I could take that one as well. I think by far the best route to take would be to look once again at those COVID-19 adjustments and the LFA adjustments we've taken, because most of these are already in place, right? A lot of professors already have the course materials made. So I think it becomes less a matter of installing new things and getting new things and setting up new programs, and it becomes more a matter of trying to persuade faculty members, trying to persuade departments to maintain certain policies, right? And taking more of an outreach perspective opposed to a hard change in the physical components of the workspace. Specifically, the online textbooks actually were very, very popular. So I think that might be a reasonable, that might be a point to advise departments at.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. It's a great answer. I wonder if you see any way for students to be involved in encouraging that behavior among faculty. I think it is definitely a message that can come from operations and leadership at the university, but I wonder if you see any potential for students to be of influence.
I think really the best thing to do would be to just take a grassroots approach, right? Maybe have a campaign of outreach to students saying, hey, you guys, you should reach out to professors, try and get them to move more stuff online, talk about how it's benefited you. And I think just having students reach out to faculty one-on-one, reaching out to their advisors, maybe if they're doing research and they have kind of a close relationship with like a research mentor, reaching out to that mentor and suggesting, hey, maybe for your classes, you should consider doing X, Y, and Z. So I think a grassroots approach really might be the best option here.
Lavi, I'd like to mention that we're actually at a perfect time in the semester where students could comment on their student evaluations that they found online textbooks or online quizzes or whatever particularly helpful. They'd like to see that continue in the future. Getting that positive reinforcement on those student evaluations, which are seen by the faculty member, but are also often seen by the department or program administrators, especially since faculty may have an impression that students would prefer hard copies. And so if they were to get that reinforcement that actually the students liked having the digital access, that would be a good way of sort of influencing faculty impressions of the LFA experiment, so to speak. William, you have your hand up.
Sorry, yeah. You made a great point about teachers wanting to go back to kind of like paper tests due to security reasons. And my question was just, would you have the paper limit be uniform across, just say, department or any sort of level like that for all teachers? Because some teachers, like for example, a professor in a Calc 1 class could have 120, 140 students over 1, 2, 3, or 4 sections, and just by giving a 5-person exam, they could already be at like 600 pages, 700 pages. So would it be uniform across like entire school, entire departments, or would it be like, I don't know, more scaled levels depending on the teacher? If that makes sense. I don't know.
Well, that point is actually the reason why we've been leaning towards more pricing instead of having hard limits. I think, like, as we know from like the basic economic sciences, right? When you price things, people can consume as much as they are able to, or as much as they're willing and able to, and as much as they need, but it still gives the option for them to consume less, and it creates incentives against overproduction. So by implementing pricing, that Calc 1 professor who does need to print out 600 pages for an exam, they have that option, right? However, let's say, for example, maybe in like a literature class, like I'm taking a literature class now as part of the Hub program, we may not need to print out every single reading, right? Those can maybe go online. So I think having pricing creates that flexibility to accommodate for a bunch of different needs based on like what the goals of an individual professor might be.
William, I would add that the writing program, we don't have pricing, but we do have caps. And the way that it is set is it's per student. So faculty members get a cap based on the number of students they're teaching. So, you know, I don't know exactly what mine is because I always am a low printer, even before LFA, but I would have maybe, you know, maybe I'd be allowed to print out, say, 75 pages per student per semester. So if I'm teaching larger classes, I would have a higher, you know, I would have a higher print cap, but that's because, you know, they've put the cap per, you know, sort of per student that I'm teaching, which I think is a pretty reasonable way to do it, as long as you guys mentioned in your presentation, as long as that cap is reasonable and discourages extraneous printing, and as long as it is enforced and not just, you know, sort of words. All right, Andy?
Yeah, I love this idea of a grassroots effort in student evaluations for this semester to really try and put the message out there to faculty, because faculty do read the evaluations. The more you can just create the conversation with this grassroots thing, the better. So spread the word far and wide as soon as you can to your peers to try and, you know, maybe make this an issue. And given the nature of this class, we all should be taking on a little bit of this leadership. If you're okay with putting this in your evaluations of your faculty, I really encourage you to do so. It could start the conversation a lot better than it's been started. The other thing to do is maybe keep in mind a receptive department, okay? And what I mean by that, maybe it's the writing program, but you know, maybe it's the College of General Studies, wherever it is. Maybe you could just get a small case study going, another grassroots case study where you could implement this tracking and really see what's happening to collect data, even on a small scale. And again, it might be hard to do it across the university, but you might find some, you know, really good department or school or college that might want to do this. And then you can in a grassroots way, this could end up really changing things for the university. So, you know, pay attention to that. I'll come back and circle back to the three of you and say, where do you think this best might work? Because another grassroots effort, small scale, really could start this rolling as well.
Well, these are, I hate to cut the conversation short, but we do have one last group to go. So Yashi, if you and your group are ready to present, these are just wonderful. And yes, there's a wonderful conversation happening in the chat as well. So keep that going. All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and my group and I will be talking to you about GSU food waste data transparency at BU. So just to start off, our main focus is pre-consumer food waste, and this includes waste in the kitchen phase of food production, such as scraps, trimmings, and unsold meals. Pre-consumer food waste is a large problem in the United States, with about 40% of food being wasted in the production phase. Unfortunately, many studies have found that the majority of this waste is thrown out rather than being donated, recycled, or disposed of. Luckily, BU, this is not as big of a problem as there have been many efforts to reduce pre-consumer food waste. Rather than disposing of waste in a landfill, BU anaerobically digests food waste and donates some extra meals through Food for Free. BU also uses LeanPath to track the types of pre-consumer food waste in the dining halls and at the GSU. So this data on pre-consumer food waste already exists and is BU's data to share with whoever they choose. BU also shares some information on food waste already through the annual sustainability reports. However, we find that there is more data that could be shared in these reports. With the tracking infrastructure already in place with LeanPath and a data sharing platform being used every year, sharing more data in pre-consumer food waste would require minimal changes.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi all, I'm Angelica and I also researched about the sustainability reports from BU. Here's what we found within the pre-consumer food waste area in past recent years. We believe that these are great examples of BU already making the move towards data transparency. However, we do believe that with more data being shared and accessible, these reports could be more informative and truly track our progress towards zero waste, which is our end goal. And so with our proposed addition of more specific pre-consumer food waste data to the sustainability reports, we think that these 3 questions are a great starter point. And firstly, how much pre-consumer food waste was produced this year? Any change with the previous years? And this would include mentioning any the types of waste. And secondly, another question we thought it was kind of a great starting point is, where did the pre-consumer food waste go? Meaning more specifically, what is the percentage of donations that are of the donations, the food waste diverted and composted, etc. And thirdly, what are the reductions on the environment? Recalling this would be data specific to the GSU.
Hi, my name is Daniel, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why our group chose to focus on the GSU for this project. It's basically because we think the GSU presents a great opportunity for BU to improve its sustainability and data sharing practices. As Angelica mentioned, we know that BU tracks data through LeanPath, both at the dining halls and the GSU as of 2019. But we don't have the pre-consumer food waste data available, so we don't know how much waste there is. And we know that sort of a lot of the initiatives at BU Sustainability and BU Dining focus on the dining halls. For example, BU Policy says that BU Dining already prepares meals in small portions, but it's unclear if these policies extend to the restaurant associates at the GSU. And since we don't have the data, we're not sure how much waste is being generated. So this does leave open the possibility for overproduction, and that can be a real area of improvement for BU Dining and sustainability.
All right, so my name is Giovanni, and I'm going to go over why we need food waste data. We think that we can use this data to divert any potential food waste, either from trash, from compost, into consumer use through many student-run programs. We found that there was evidence from a lot of personal statements and interviews we conducted with food service workers at the GSU that actually suggests that hundreds of pounds of food are composted daily, and this could be redirected. If students had access to GSU pre-consumer restaurant data, they can work on waste mitigation strategies and initiatives. Here are some possible initiatives that we can create with LeanPath data. So first, we have the donation programs such as Food for Free that BU is already partnered with, scaling up those donation programs, working with them more. And also Food for Every Terrier, which is a potential program that would be an end-of-day flash sale, selling food that would otherwise be thrown out or composted. This additionally gains BU some profits, food security for students, and also a program that just never has been done before on any college campus.
Hi all, my name is Violet, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the value of data sharing at peer institutions. When we were going through and doing research for this project, we wanted to see, which universities were doing stuff that was similar to what we wanted to do. What we came up with MIT, University of Notre Dame, and University of Illinois. MIT, right across the river, their Office of Sustainability is actually very transparent with their food waste data, And because of this, students were actually able to develop and launch an app called Spoiler, on which they can resell leftover food from their dining halls and other facilities. At the University of Notre Dame, they actually share their LeanPath data with the public, and they decided to do this after realizing how large an issue their pre-consumer food waste was. And at the University of Illinois, they actually reduce overproduction by creating daily specials with their leftovers. They also have monitors at the entrances of their dining halls to display real-time food waste. So people can, with LeanPath Spark, I should say, so that students can make informed choices about their meals and their waste.
And so here are some more benefits of making LeanPath data public to students. One, it's great PR. It shows that BU is not quote unquote greenwashing students, which is the act of corporations in pretending as if they're more sustainable than they actually are and showing that BU isn't that. In addition, we have donations, food resale programs that can be fantastic for promotions, advertising. On your right, you're going to see MIT's at-cost market called TechMart, which is advertised on their website, their news sources, as a sustainable and cost-effective system, adding to their list of programs. And we think that such a large institution as BU should have easily accessible data to support any claims and sustainability reports.
And just to wrap up here, once again, our sort of main directive of this project is to address the issue of transparency from BU Dining Services, specifically by getting access to LeanPath data from the GSU. At a world-class research institution like BU, data and open data is really the foundation for anything, whether that's research or great student initiatives. And we think sharing the LeanPath data from the GSU can be the first step to many great sustainability initiatives reducing pre-consumer food waste, such as Food for Every Terrier, food donation programs, or an at-cost market, as was tried at MIT. So once again, thank you all for listening, and we'll be happy to take any questions.
Well done. Well done. Thank you. Go ahead, Rebecca. You start.
Yeah, I really like that presentation. I feel like you hit just the right note of, sort of showing BU the benefits of being more transparent with the data. Well done. I like the switch to the blue background, a little less aggressive, very easy on the eyes, could really see the points that you were making. I had one question, and that was that there were two slides back to back that seemed a little bit contradictory. Giovanni, you made the claim that this would be the first program anywhere that that tried something like this. And then in the very next slide, they were talking about MIT and how MIT students created this app that allows them to sell to sell leftover food. So that seemed like, well, MIT is already doing it, so this does, so I'm just curious about that seeming contradiction there.
So I've done a little bit of research on Spoiler. I'm sure the rest of my team has done much more research on Spoiler, especially people like Daniel and Violet who've done that specific research. But I know that MIT's Spoiler app is more of like a pinging thing where students can actually ping events, just such as BU's established. They're releasing a new app called where they can ping like events on campus, and then all the food there will actually go to donations or go to students, and then give every student like an alert on their phone saying, come grab this food. Spoiler is something like that, but they sell the food. It's not exactly like Food for Every Terrier, which would partner with Grubhub and BU Dining Services on such a large scale to do like a flash sale program. So they're a little bit different, but I understand the misconception right there. I've definitely thought about that too. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because that was the only thing I was like, saying it's never been done before, and then immediately like, oh, MIT is doing this thing, and I'm like, it wasn't a big deal. I was just curious about that discrepancy there.
Oh, thank you for clearing that up. I had a similar thought, like, wait a sec, never been done before on any college campus. So good, very good. Any other questions for this group? I mean, it's a compelling argument. You know, why not transparency? Why not the ability of a research institution to get its hands-on data, real data that might really be, you know, effective in implementing various marketing and, you know, real campaigns to help get to zero waste.
So we unfortunately, Lisa and Katie were not available to come today. And as we said, they sort of feel like unfortunately food is not technically part of their, you know, the sustainability office, but they did say that they would be very interested in seeing the presentation. So we're going to share the recording with them, and that they would be happy to help put us in contact with the correct people at BU Dining to put this in front of, you know, the right eyes, so that so that the people who need to know, who are in a position to make those decisions, can do that. So Andy and I will continue to press in that direction. You know, we're not, since we don't work with BU Dining directly, we don't know the people, but Katie said that she would get us some names of the, you know, the decision makers, the people who would be the right people to put this in front of.
Awesome. And this is also true for the next presentation. You know, we'll get the right names to present this to, the right group for BU, both dining service entities and who runs each. So same is true for what we'll see shortly.
Yeah, well, we definitely understand this is like an ongoing process, and that we have a lot of really good ideas about what we can do with this waste that we see at the GSU. But that first step is really that transparency. So that would be really great.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I really like your comparison with how the lean path data is used at other universities. I think that that's a really compelling argument to show that peer institutions that are already using lean path, which is what BU uses, that they're, you know, making that lean path data accessible in ways that are bringing about actual, you know, actual change and improvement. So I think that that's a really compelling argument. So. All right.
Totally
Thank
agree.
you so much.
All right.
Start. I'm going to hand it over to Angela. Thank you.
Hello, colleagues, Professors Kinred and Andres, and to the special guests that are joining us today. We are BU Reuse. My name is Angela, and this is my team.
My name is Parmi.
My name is John Carlotti.
I'm Gonzalo.
And I'm Yashasvi.
It's the previous slide. Oops.
Wait, this one now?
Oh, yes, that one. Thank you. As you all know, the end of the semester is coming up. Our friend Josh needs to change residences on campus and needs a space to store her items such as books or lamps for when she's traveling back home for the summer to visit her family. She has some alternatives, such as leaving her items at a storage facility, donating these items, and or throwing them to the garbage. However, Josh, and as all students at university do as well, lives on a college budget. So spending her money on a storage facility that charges by pound is not a good idea. In addition, Boston University gives a limited move out period in which Josh must manage her time between studying for her finals, eating, sleeping, and packing, leaving little time to take some items to a local donation center or spot, which is why she just chooses to throw them into the trash. Josh's situation is very common indeed among students, not only at Boston University, but also at other universities in Boston and across the country. According to Tufts University, there's a significant spike in the amount of solid waste generated on college campuses, specifically during the months of May and June, when their students leave behind an average of 230 tons of solid waste, which is a lot. But what does solid waste mean? Solid waste is commonly known as trash, and it's a type of waste that consists of everyday items that are discarded. It comes from industrial, residential, or commercial settings and can be handled either by recycling, composting, waste to energy, also known as incineration, and leaving them on landfills. Adding to the problem of insanely expensive storage opportunities and limited time slots for move out,
which add to the already existing stress of students, a 2014 study from the University of Iowa determined that the two main reasons cited for not recycling were lack of available space and no available information on how and where to recycle. Unfortunately, most of the solid waste from students can be reusable, which is why we believe something should be done.
So our solution in producing a more sustainable community at Boston University is by creating an online exchange platform in means of an app. The idea behind this application is to create the value of many items which would normally be disposed of and rather create value out of them. Whether this means you have an item on your hands and you want to get rid of it, the app will be a great connective hub to access other students who might be in need of your items for an exchange, material, or capital. Ultimately, this application will produce a market on our campus built on the idea of reusing. Next slide. So now going into a bit of more details, this app will connect buyers, sellers, and traders. Participants will be able to access the listings on the homepage of the app. In addition to a search bar, all participants will have direct access to messaging buyers and sellers on the app. In the process of execution, the participants will independently schedule pickup times, pickup location, and payment methods of their personal preference. Capital and material exchange incentives will go a long way in ensuring application activity all throughout the campus. Once again, the leading goal of this application would be to form a community at BU in which students participate in a reusable market, and hence we will be able to accomplish BU's sustainability goals much faster through a friendly app.
Okay, so the data collected from a survey of over 100 Boston University students gave us an incredible amount of information on Boston University's community. And from it, we discovered that 86% of BU students that responded to the survey have already purchased used items in the past, and 61% sold at least one used item. And this is very important to know, as they could likely buy or sell more used items in the future using our app. We also asked in our survey how comfortable students are in purchasing and selling used items. And only 8.5% of BU students find it very uncomfortable or somewhat uncomfortable to purchase a used item, while 12% of students find it very or somewhat uncomfortable in selling those used items. And they could, these students could be uncomfortable because they might be scared to receive broken items or nothing at all, or unusable items with everything. Or maybe the site they're using doesn't check if the seller is a trustworthy source and making the buyer a little worried. As for the seller's part, maybe the cost of subscription is too expensive for just selling few items, or maybe they don't have enough time to just, maybe they don't have a month or two to leave the item in there as they're students and they have to leave. So it's not quick and efficient. The other most crucial part of our survey was based over the last question, which asked if you were interested in a BU student online only app to trade, buy, and sell reusable items. And this was very important for us, as our project was based on this question and on the app. So 76.5% of students liked our idea, 20% will consider it, and only 2.6% of the survey participants will not use it. And this was a very positive and helpful information, as it shows that the students here at Boston University would use our app, which will reduce waste in our campus, and if done successfully, can be taken as an example in every single university or college in the US.
So the next we talk about is how do we plan to market our platform? First will be collaborating with various BU awareness programs that already exist. To name them, we begin with Sustainability Liaison. So that's a program which expands from Charles River campus to the Met campus, including of faculty, staff, and graduate students. What they basically do is that they regularly meet with sustainability department in order to discuss ways to improve communication on campus sustainability issues, discuss potential projects and any successes that they've had in the past. Next will be Environmental Leadership Program, which is a common platform for all of BU student-led organizations that work towards environment and sustainability to come together in order to collaborate and communicate with each other. The next idea is using posters. So all across the campus, to name a few, we see a lot of posters, digital posters outside Warden States, Warden Towers, Dining Hall, GSU, etc. So using that space. The idea with posters is that posters really allow you to be creative, use of graphics and images and large fonts, colors. As much as we do plan to collaborate with BU sustainability departments and other possible departments to connect to students via emails, this will the flexibility of how you really want to present the information in terms of color, fonts, etc. It makes it more likely for somebody to pay more attention to something when you're, like, for example, walking along GSU. Social media, it's the world all over across. Everyone's literally online right now. Social media has become a very important part of our life. So we do intend to use social media as a means to promote our platform. One social media that we can think of is the unofficial BU page, which is completely run by BU students. Next will be BU student organizations. So the idea is to make it a trend that all of the BU student organizations introduce our program at the beginning of every semester, and if possible, maybe a couple more times during the semester. So this will be an introduction for new members who are joining the organizations and a reiteration for the already existing members. This way, we serve two purposes: not only promote our platform, but also emphasize on the importance of sustainability and how BU is seriously working towards that goal. And last will be BU Housing and Residence Life. So we know that BU Housing already gets in touch with incoming freshmen before they're even on campus. So make use of those emails as another source to reach out to students and make them aware of this existing platform that they would have. And Residence Life and BU Housing in general, in terms of putting posters in various residence halls and buildings, so that people become more and more aware of this program. Now, the entire concept of the marketing strategy is to reiterate and re-emphasize the fact that there is this platform that students can use in order to reduce the kind of waste they produce, make them aware of the incentive that they have is they're also able to sell it. So maybe maybe able to make some money out of it. This reiteration process is also backed up by a study done by Howard University in 2004, where they did find out that as a means of reiteration and re-emphasis of a particular concept, you train your brain in a manner that it eventually begins to imprint your behavior. So this will be the idea, as Angela pointed out, the situation that next time when Yash is really thinking of what to do with all of this stuff that I don't need anymore, or I cannot carry with me to the next place that I'm going, this idea that BU reuse exists and maybe I can just sell all of my stuff there, and the fact that it will be there all throughout the semester, and it's not just restricted to, oh, I only have 24 hours to go. Our platform will be really useful in that case.
Okay, so we do recognize that there are other apps in place that have similar functions to the project idea that we are focusing on. So when it comes with online platforms for use for selling any type of items, especially large ones, people depend on sites like Craigslist or eBay. And whenever our and then on the other hand, when people are trying to rely on the exchange of things like clothes and of the sort, more like smaller items, they depend on sites like Depop or Poshmark. So most of these applications that are instituted in place have been specialized to sell specific items for the most part. So whenever applicants are trying to sell or buy items, they would have to switch between the apps in order to buy or sell whatever their item they're holding, trying to exchange, which is rather inconvenient for their user, which wouldn't be what our app would be focusing on, because everything would be just in one place, so it would be convenient. So recently, one of the apps that has actually been kind of successful and similar to what we're working on would be the social call app developed by a student in Northeastern. That's essentially can be considered a Facebook marketplace, but for students in the university. It does include a wide range of universities. It's not specific to BU, but you can set the settings and localize it to the BU community. So although the purpose of this app is similar to what we're working on, the execution is a little bit different. The app does have surveys held for students once in a while that really have no relation to the original purpose of the app, which some students found kind of an unnecessary feature. So yeah. So other universities have instituted like projects and programs that serve for the same goal of sustainability and reducing waste at their local universities. Some great examples would be the University of Texas at Austin's Trash Treasure program and the San Francisco State University No Bicycles Left Behind. We did try to contact them to see what factors made their program so successful. The only difference is that their programs are only temporary and they only happen on specific dates. They're not like a available year-round. So now we're going to move on to what makes our application different. So why is it better? So it can be summarized into these three different aspects: accessibility, convenience, and reliability. When it comes to accessibility, no one really wants to use an app that's difficult to use or has multiple features that are unnecessary. According to an article by Forbes, if an app is deemed to be too complicated by the user, there is a 14% probability that it's going to be deleted in the future and not even be used. So the app would essentially be considered kind of failed because of low usage and low utilization rates. In terms of convenience, because everything happens in your community, everything is accessible to you like in person. Thanks to the fact that most of the exchanges are going to be made in person, you shouldn't have to mail or like wait for items to be shipped to you, because they can be arranged to be picked up on site, since the person who you're doing the exchange with is basically in your community and nearby. In terms of reliability, users tend to distrust online applications in which they have to exchange items or buy and sell due to the fear of being scammed. Again, because this is mostly in-person exchange, users won't really have to fear that. According to an article by eBay that's focused on avoiding scams, most of the scams occur whenever the person is mailing or packaging items. And because that's not happening through this in this project, the amount of fraudulent behavior is rather low, if not zero. We would like the app to be executed as fast as possible for the best success rate, but we have brainstormed a few possible concerns for the future, which I'll hand it over to Josh now so that she can give more details about that.
So some of the concerns that we came across in the process of developing this project, first is coming up with an app, because none of us are particularly IT, computer science majors or so closely associated with the IT aspect of it. We kind of need outside help, probably reach out to some of our computer science friends or some other source. So associated with that would also be funding, because then we'll need some money in order to develop that. So that is one concern that we need to tackle for now. Storage space, although we said that the app is super convenient in the sense that the buyer and the seller are completely in touch with each other, so they are completely free to decide what time to meet, where to meet, and so on and so forth. The problem we came across was when it was about graduating students and incoming freshmen, because their timeline does not really overlap. So a graduating student would be long gone before the next incoming freshman batch is physically present on campus. So in case there's an exchange of material to happen between them, where would that item or whatever number of items will be stored in the meantime? So that storage space is another concern. Quality control, of course. I mean, there's a certain amount of decency and honesty expected from everyone, that if you're using it and you belong to the same community, you would probably be honest about the kind of items you're selling and what kind of demands do you have. But these concerns always do come up. So probably a screening process or an intermediary, just to make sure that whatever exchanges are happening properly and correctly, or maybe like a portal for complaint registration. Then security of the app for website users. That being said, our idea is to make the app private in the sense that only the BU student community has access to it. And of course, the app developers and the respective departments from BU that will be involved, so that students have their security, because they will be accessing the app, likely accessing the app through their BU emails and BU information. So we need to figure out a way to do that in the process of app development. As far as paying and delivery of item goes, although we have come to a conclusion that we would let it be a private matter between the buyer, seller, or traders, however it works out, because that gives them more freedom in terms of the kind of platform they want to use in terms of money exchange, or just simply use liquid cash. Like, it'll give them more freedom, but then it probably is still open for discussion and for the deliberation, just in case we come up with better options. But for now, we are sticking with the one that we decided to let it be between the two parties, because then that also reduces one extra step that we might have to approach in the process of app development.
So as we see this as a long-term project, we would like to help also specific groups within the BU community. And we believe that study abroad programs and international students should be helped as well, as the change of culture and the way of living is different in each country, but also traveling is a problem, as not everything can be brought back home or onto campus. So if international students and study abroad students are informed of our app, they will be able to easily access it and purchase anything they need at a cheaper price, as well as being eco-friendly. Or if they're leaving and going back home, instead of throwing items that cannot be brought back home, they can sell it in our app before they leave. And another future plan that we will try to make a possibility of is to potentially involve charities. And if a student doesn't want to sell their items and prefers to donate, our app will have also a donation mode where they can donate to local charities. And thanks for listening, and if you have any questions.
Thank you for that great presentation. It's really neat to see all the work you've put into it. And I would love to see this come to fruition on campus. I hate seeing all that stuff getting thrown out at the end of the semester. Great. Comments or questions?
I have one. I agree with you, Rebecca. I would also really love to see this. I think you guys have a lot of good information in there, so thank you for the work you put into it. My first question would be, it sounds like you did a little bit of peer university research. And I'm curious if you found any universities who do have an only online exchange platform. I know you said the ones that you looked into had something physical, a storage space, but wondering if you came across anywhere that has a successful online program.
I can answer this one. So at the beginning of the semester, when we began the first round of research, we did find that Cornell does have like an online kind of exchange, but it's only for like the only items that are ever posted or people who are able to post there are like Cornell administrators or like faculty. So whenever I tried logging into their site, the only item I saw were like university furniture being sold at like relatively very low prices. But when I did more research to see if students were able to also post items, it was like a no for students, so it was only for them. But the students were able to like buy the items off of there.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Of course.
My only comment would be just how thorough and comprehensive this idea is. You've thought about a lot of different things, and so I appreciate that. I want to let you know that I like the comprehensive nature of what you've gone, through in your research and thinking around this.
Thank you so much, my team, and I really appreciate that.
My informal survey of my writing classes today suggested that many of them would love to have something like this, particularly if it were paired with a slightly longer move out period so that they could, like they actually need their layup through the last day of, living on campus. So they don't necessarily want to sell it 4 or 5 days in advance. But they, that really short move out time is tricky. It's definitely part of the problem.
Yeah, and I see this going well with the current Goodwill Not Landfill donation program that we run today. So those last minute items, right, can just be physically dropped off in your dorm if you need them to the last day. But really, it would have, if this platform existed, you could just encourage people to start thinking earlier about what things you can live without for your last 3 weeks. And if you could get, money for them or have the experience of giving somebody else something that they need, which I think is a feel-good experience, I could see students getting excited about that and being motivated to start thinking about move out earlier. One other question I had, so I know your idea is an app. How important do you think it is that there's a website, computer platform that goes along with it, or do you think students really only need the app?
I can take this one. So we really wanted to begin with an app and then proceed towards how successful this platform becomes and in how much time does it become that then we can move on to a website. The deliberation when we had about what to choose to begin with, app was a popular idea, reason being that you can have it on your phone versus a website which kind of like requires a couple of steps. It's not that you cannot access it, but then there's always a couple of steps that you need to become a part of. So app was like easier and more accessible. You literally have it with you everywhere. So that would, and like the fact that people generally do not want to put in a lot of work when it comes to things like this, it's like making it as easy and simpler as possible was the idea. But yes, eventually, because we already, as we've explained, one of our future programs, future plans with respect to this platform, which is the study abroad one, we certainly would want to expand it to a website, because then we personally believe that a website will be much easier for the study abroad students in order, like for accessing. And just to add on to the previous conversation that we were you guys were having about move out timings and everything, this flexibility is already it already exists. If this app turns out that, if for example I'm willing to sell the lamp that I have but not give it away until the last day, you're free to communicate with the buyer, put it on the app or website, and just know that yes, we will be doing this exchange. And then because you have the freedom to fix a date and a time, you know that you can do it on the last day of your move out or the day when you're moving out. So it gives them that freedom and that availability as well, that have it for as long as you want, and then you can also give it away.
That's a great point. Yeah. Thank you.
Katie, how successful is the the Goodwill donations program? I mean, I don't know if you have any statistics on how much usable stuff ends up in the trash bins that are literally right next to the donation bins.
I don't have that specific statistic, but I do know that we collect, something to the tune of 50 tons of donatable items per May move out period. That's what we've been averaging the last couple of years. So that's a lot of material that significantly impacts our diversion percentage for the entire university. It's probably one of our most successful programs, I would say. And I mean, trash does spike during move out as well. But just think, if we didn't have that program, we'd have 50 tons more trash. So it's highly successful. I think the downfalls are, people not donating the items that Goodwill actually wants, and also donating a lot of broken items. But again, I think that, I consider that to be hopefully a permanent part of the BU move out process. It's been around for a long time. I think there's improvements that can be made, but I see it as very complementary to this online platform as well.
Right, and the problem of broken and non-usable items being donated to Goodwill is prevalent everywhere. Everywhere you have a collection site, you end up with stuff they don't want.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But the more options, more user-friendly options that we present students with to get their usable items to the right location, the better, right? The more that we'll see being kept out of the trash.
Right. Well, and as one of my students in my medical debates class who was looking at organ donation, she had some statistic about, how people need some sort of economic incentive to do the right thing. If you could sell an item, you might be more likely to part with it than if you feel like you're just donating it to Goodwill. Well, everybody, thank you so much. This was wonderful. The presentations today, they were, so professional, really well put together. I enjoyed, I mean, of course, Andy and I have been seeing them all semester, but it was really nice to see even just the changes that have been made since last week were, really, really nice. So congratulations. We look forward to our final 2 presentations on Wednesday. So everybody, come hungry. We're going to be talking about food, and so we look forward to seeing you guys all on Wednesday. Andy and I can stick around for a few minutes if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, we will see you then.
Katie, do you have a few minutes?
I do. Yep.
Can you stick around as well? Love to chat.
Sure. Great job, everybody.
Yes, great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good day.